just getting a couple of elements started. As you can see, the messages come out saying the session is being live streamed and being recorded, so it can also be seen on YouTube. You can watch it back afterwards on YouTube as well if there's anything you've missed. So I'll just let a few participants fill in, and then we'll run through a couple of the ground rules for the session. I'm Alex, the Communications Director here at GWEC, and yes, see a few more people log in there. Okay, I think we've had a few people come into the room, so say hello to you all, and welcome to today's webinar on capturing green recovery opportunities from wind power in developing economies. We've got some great speakers for you today. You can hopefully see them up on your screen there. Before we start, I'll just run through a couple of the ways the session will work. You can submit questions for the panelists through the Q&A function that you should see on the bottom of your toolbar. Should just look like that. They'll come through. We'll feed those into Ramon, who's moderating the discussion later, and he'll put those to the panelists, and we'll take them through there. In a moment, we will start hopefully with some more remarks from Ben. But we also be followed by Mona Peterson from BVG Associates, who've worked with us to put together the report. First, I'm going to hand over to Ramon Fiestas, who is the chairman of GWEC's Latin American Committee, and he's going to be moderating our session. So I'm just going to hand over to Ramon, and he can take you through a couple of the people joining us today, and then we'll hear from Ben. But yeah, I'll let Ramon speak for a moment first.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. We are very pleased and happy to have you all here for this seminar webinar of capturing green recovery opportunities from wind power in developing economies. This is a report that we released with the support of BVG Associates, and so what we wanted to highlight is the vast and really largely unexploited socio-economic and environmental opportunities attached to wind energy. So we selected for this study 5 developing economies in order to put them to balance the different situations in each countries and in regard what are the capabilities of wind power in those selected areas. The countries was Brazil, as really a spotlight market in Latin America in the last 2 years, India, South Africa, Mexico, probably the red light or the red lamp on in this case, and the Philippines. So the idea is to highlight somehow the benefits that are hidden in wind power developments, especially in times in which the economic recovery is a task for each of the governments that has been hit by the pandemic of the COVID in its different phases. So the outcomes are really interesting. I see that after this report, we have already been noticed of different reports that are as well highlighting specific situation or specific sectors in each of these countries that can as well give us a good idea on what is going on in terms of the outcomes of renewable energy investments, specifically in wind power. And what we see is that almost the countries that has invested in wind power in these 5 areas have experienced really an increase in these budgets in each country because of the effect of the increasingly effect of investments in renewable energy in the budget that can drive from 3 times to 5 times each single dollar or euro invested in wind power. because of the direct and indirect effects of investments in the supply chain, and of course in other side or collateral activities that are engaging in renewable energy deployment. So I think we will have a really a very good approach with the selected specialists that have participated in this report, and we will have the chance to open the floor to the public and the people attending, to your attendees, to issue the questions that you have in regard the report, and I'm sure we will be able to answer them properly and to give the right signals to all these questions that can arise. So Alex, I'm not sure if Ben is joining.
I'm here, Ramon.
Okay, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ramon, and welcome everyone. And really, good to see you all, and thank you for joining. And I'd really like to, first of all, thank BVG Associates who put this report together, but also all the input that we've had from our association partners in these key developing country geographies. It's been a fantastic process, really getting that kind of granularity and local knowledge into this report. We see this as a model for many other reports in the future and more work, but also the response that we've seen over the last week since we released the report, where with a very strong level of interest from media, but stakeholders and government as well. I just wanted to say a few words, really. First of all, I think there's really no doubt anymore that the energy transition needs to be seen as an opportunity and not a cost. And I think this current period we're in, with these very extreme spikes in energy prices that we're seeing around the world, really just should reinforce the need to move decisively with the energy transition. We can't stop halfway. We're in a situation where the world knows that fossil fuels, is no longer a viable way to base our energy economies on. We cannot continue to put carbon into the atmosphere. We're aware now of all the environmental and social externalities of fossil fuels, and we need to move very decisively. We have a mandate from the 192 countries that have signed the Paris Accord. That consensus is stronger than ever, and we saw that very clearly at COP26. But we can't stop halfway. We're in a situation now where we've, governments have realised that there's no reason anymore to incentivize fossil fuels, and we need to move. And we now need to make sure that we create fully renewable economies that work, that keep the lights on, that integrate, that have sufficient investment in grids, in technology, in demand, in all these kind of new things that we're going to need. If we stay in a kind of halfway house where we don't invest fast enough in renewables, and we're also not investing in fossil, then we're going to see the kind of price volatility that we're seeing at the moment, with these very high gas and coal prices around the world. And I think what's clear here is that the governments which have moved forward decisively and which have allowed the private sector to get on with it and invest have been really successful. Look at Brazil as an example, and how steadily the wind renewables market has grown there, how manufacturing companies have located to Brazil, have jobs have been created, and this is really just the beginning for Brazil. Look at India and the manufacturing base that's been installed there, and again, this is just the beginning. This is all moving through the kind of roadblocks and the teething problems. There's an enormous capacity and a potential that's been created there. So I think my first message is, we need to see the energy transition through. We can't stop halfway, and it's really important for policymakers to stay firm, to stay steady, and to present this to the public as an opportunity, and not as a cost. I mean, there will be people who go against this. There will be vested interests of people who are trying to stop the energy transition. It's really, really important that our policymakers and our public figures are consistent in their messaging to the public. And where that hasn't happened, and where we've seen short-term changes in policy, such as in Mexico, then you see a society that's really missing out on a whole vital piece of investment into infrastructure that could be creating new jobs and new opportunities for people. So I think that's my first point. My second point is that the energy transition is not just about creating some jobs for some engineers and putting up some wind turbines and solar panels. This is something that can really revitalize economies, create completely new industries that can bring in the latest in technology, and that can create a workforce that is diverse, that is vibrant, that involves people from all kinds of social and economic backgrounds, that creates new skills and capabilities for people, that's gender diverse. I mean, we have the opportunity to do things differently here and to take people with us on the energy transition. And that's a really vital part of things, which is why I like this report, because we're not just talking about technology, and we're not just talking about costs and levelized cost of energy. What we're talking about here is the enabling and the mobilizing effect that the energy transition will have on society and on people. And I think that fundamentally that's got to be at the heart of our story, is what does this mean for people? And I think that's why, again, this report is so important, because it shows what is being done and what could be done if we accelerate the transition. So I think the messages are really clear. This is not going to be an easy year, as we've already seen, and it's not going to be an easy ride or an easy path towards the energy transition. I mean, at the moment, we probably need to be going probably about 3 or 4 times faster collectively as the world to get to the scenarios of the IEA and IRENA in 2050. So we really need to up our game and accelerate and speed up investment. And that's going to require really a monumental effort of working together, taking people with us, getting policy on the right track. So it's really a year of hard work ahead of us as we go to COP27 in Egypt. And I'm off to Egypt actually on Sunday to go and start that process ahead of COP27 with other people from the GWEC team. But we're up for the challenge, and I think working together with industry and communities and our sister associations, we can get the right knowledge and the right messages across, and really be able to help governments and economies to realize this great opportunity we have ahead of us. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of the next few years, and I hope you all are too. So again, thank you, Ramon, and thank you to everyone who contributed to this report, and I look forward to hearing the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I think it's time to pass the floor to Mona in order to let us know what are your findings, Mona.
Sure, thank you very much, and hello everyone. So yeah, I'm going to talk through the report and some of the main findings that we made. If I could have the next slide, please. So I thought I would start off by talking a little bit about the background of the report and why it's so important. So as Ben touched on, wind energy plays a key role in supporting a clean energy transition globally. To limit the temperature increase by the end of the century to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the volume of annual wind energy installations must scale up around 4 times over the next decade. So the urgency of moving away from fossil fuels and transitioning to clean energy generation is well recognized by countries around the world, and was a key element in the Glasgow Climate Pact endorsed at COP26 last year. But despite of this, there's a growing mismatch between the ambitions and targets around renewable energy and net zero and the actual market realities. Installing the wind energy capacity needed will require a shared vision and collaboration between government, industry, and society. And It's vital that wind energy does not face unnecessary delays due to resolvable challenges such as overly complex permit procedures and market barriers to investment. One of the challenges facing the energy transition is that the resources and coordination needed for it have been stretched over the last 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in many countries, the focus has been on short-term protections of the economy and society. But as economic activity returns after the pandemic, there's an opportunity for wind energy to deliver a green economic recovery. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this report, we looked at the economic and environmental benefits that could be created from wind energy in the next 5 years in 5 countries: Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, India, and the Philippines. So these countries were chosen because they faced particular socio-political economic challenges related to COVID-19, and they also have a significant and still largely untapped wind energy resource. And because the report looks at only the next 5 years, all the capacity that we're talking about in the report is onshore wind energy, but all of these countries also have significant offshore wind potential, and many of the broader recommendations that we make in the report are relevant to offshore wind as well. Next slide, thank you. So we started off with a business as usual forecast of installed wind energy capacity, which you can see here for the next 5 years. We looked at the current wind energy situation in each of the 5 countries, including ambitions and targets, commitments made during COP26, and economic stimulus provided for clean energy since 2020. Working with the local wind energy associations in each of the countries, as well as international finance institutions, we then identified potential barriers to like an accelerated deployment of wind energy for each country and provided recommendations on how these could be overcome. Next slide, please. And once we had established these barriers and the actions that policymakers could take to overcome them, we then created the green recovery forecasts of installed capacity that you can see here. This shows how much wind energy could be installed in each of the countries if these barriers were overcome. So across the 5 countries, as you can see, this amounts to an additional 20 gigawatts over the next 5 years, which is an increase of almost 50%. Next slide, please. So we modeled a range of economic and environmental impacts from each of the scenarios, including full-time equivalent job years created, gross value added to the economy, tons of CO2 equivalent saved by replacing fossil fuels, homes powered by clean energy, and liters of water saved compared to the fossil fuel generation. The table you can see here is included in the report, and I won't go through it in detail, but to pull out a few of the findings, under the green recovery scenario, an additional 575,000 job years could be created in Brazil. India could avoid an additional 229 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. Mexico could add an additional $3.5 billion of GVA to the economy. South Africa could power 2 million additional homes, and the Philippines could save 2 million additional liters of water. Next slide, please. So finally, we identified 3 main potential barriers to wind energy deployment, which are common to developing economies around the world. And we provided recommendations to policymakers on how to address these barriers proactively in cooperation with the wind energy industry and also other stakeholders. The first barrier we identified was around policy commitment. So in many countries, governments remain committed to conventional fossil fuel-based electricity generation. And even in countries where the government is generally positive towards renewable energy and have clean energy targets in place, there's often a lack of enabling policy frameworks and regulation to support the investment in wind energy and other renewables. So to overcome this barrier, policy must provide a clear vision of the government's long-term plans to provide confidence in the market. This could be through targets, updated nationally determined contributions, comprehensive national climate strategies, and energy plans. And national visions should include specific wind energy targets with clear timelines and also roadmaps on how to achieve it. The targets and strategies for wind energy and associated grid should be aligned between public bodies governing areas such as climate, environment, energy, economy, infrastructure, and workforce. Governments need to state clearly their aspirations, plans, and drivers for facilitating wind energy deployment to help the industry deliver, especially around supply chain development and cost reduction. And because the development and construction of a wind energy project can take longer than the typical political cycle, cross-party support is really important because it provides long-term confidence for investors. And a clear route to market is needed to decrease investment risk for developers, as well as to aid investment in local supply chain. And a long-term procurement pipeline should be established with clear visibility of the area suited for development, the expected amount of generation sought, and also likely timeframes. And finally, collaboration between industry and government is key to successfully building and also evolving the required policy frameworks. So the second barrier we identified is around transmission system infrastructure. Because wind energy projects rely on land availability, wind resource, and grid connection points, the area that are best for wind energy projects are not always the same as where the grid is well developed. The development of the transmission system infrastructure in many countries is coordinated by a separate organization to that which develops and plans wind energy projects. And in some countries, one or both of these are also managed regionally rather than nationally. And if this leads to the transmission system not being developed at the right time and in the right place for wind energy projects, then this can increase investment risk and potentially delay wind energy deployment. So to overcome these barriers, there are a number of actions that policymakers can take. A clear, bankable, and fair mechanism and framework for allocating grid connections is important for developers, as a lack of this can increase investment risk. Large-scale public and private investment in secure, smart, and flexible grid is key as more and more renewable energy is connected to the grid. And forward planning of the transmission network expansion and investment in developing the network should be accelerated, as this can help avoid delays and grid congestion in the future and increase the potential sites that developers will consider for wind projects. This planning should be done in coordination with the planning for future wind energy development areas to ensure that the grid is sufficiently strengthened and available when needed in relevant areas. The third barrier we identified is around complex frameworks for leasing, permitting, and power purchase. In many countries, these frameworks are very complex and bureaucratic, which can lead to a delay in wind energy deployment if it means that projects can't obtain the necessary permits and approvals in a sensible timeframe. In many countries, documents and applications need to be submitted to multiple national and local agencies, and a lack of clarity on procedures and timelines, as well as poor coordination between agencies and jurisdictions, can lead to delays, uncertainty, and inefficiencies. So to overcome these barriers, frameworks should be simplified, and governments should consider establishing a one-stop shop to manage and coordinate all the documents and applications. Strong coordination between different framework administrators is key, as well as coordination with ministries responsible for energy and environment. Developing and changing legislation and framework can take quite a lot of time, and it is important that governments facilitate good communication with industry to plan and implement any changes in an agreed timescale. And some of the framework measures that should be considered are mandated maximum lead times to permit renewable energy projects, a structured and time-limited process for developers to provide evidence for their expected timeframes and project plans, and a clearinghouse mechanism for legal disputes. So to summarize, in the report, we looked at economic and environmental benefits that wind energy could provide and found that in the 5 countries examined, compared to a business as usual scenario, a green economic recovery could add nearly 20 gigawatts of additional wind energy, create 2.2 million additional full-time equivalent job years, add $22 billion more to the economy, and save over 700 million tons more of CO2 equivalent emissions. So to achieve this in developing economies, we found that 3 common barriers for policymakers to overcome, and that a green recovery based on wind energy requires clear policy for government, sufficient transmission system infrastructure, and simplified frameworks for permitting, leasing, and power purchase frameworks. And by addressing these barriers that we identified proactively, policymakers in developing economies can support an accelerated wind energy deployment and a green economic recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mona. Really very interesting key takeaways. And I would say that um, the difference between developed countries and developing countries in terms of having the frameworks perfectly streamlined and fitted is that developed countries has already integrated environmental policies into energy policies. And what happens in countries under development is that this integration is absolutely lacking. So there is and sometimes we see incoherence between national determinant contribution and climate policies and energy policies. And this is not providing the right signals to investors, and this is not providing the right pathways for renewable energy developments in these countries. So now I see that we will have a very rich discussion with our panelists that we have here this morning, afternoon, or wherever you are. We have here Elvia Ganum. Elvia is the CEO of the Brazilian Wind Energy Association since really a number of years, heading the Brazilian wind power sector. We have here as well Mauricio Herrera. Mauricio is recently enacted as spokesman of the Mexican Wind Energy Association, a former officer at the Comisión Reguladora de Energía. We have as well Lezogonolo Sosai. She is a technical program officer of the South African Wind Energy Association. And of course, we have here Mike Blanche as the Associate Director of PBG Associates and responsible for the report. So I think we will have a very good discussion here this afternoon. And of course, I remember everybody that the floor is open for submitting questions, and we can address them at the end of the discussion. So I would like to start with Mike. Mike, what we know is that, of course, every country has its own economic realities. I mean, every country or each country that we have been selected for the report. But I would say all of them have similar, similar areas of opportunity in which wind power investments are probably different once it comes to one or the other country. I would say, for you, what are the most significant areas of this opportunity to unlock the socio-economic benefits of wind across the 5 countries that you have analyzed in the report? I mean, job creation, social and environmental gains, etc.
Yes, well, thank you, Ramon, and hi, everyone. I'm sitting in the UK at the moment, and at the moment we have about 37% of our electricity being produced by wind. But Ramon, to answer your question, there is
congratulations, this, congratulations, Mike.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is, but people shouldn't be afraid of wind. And something we haven't mentioned so far is it's cheap. You know, we talk about, if you go back 20 years, we were going to the UK government saying, yeah, we actually need to spend a lot of money on this. And they did. But now we're not saying that isn't our story. So you asked the question about what's important. I think it is looking forward. And as Mona very succinctly put, it is looking forward and saying, what are the things that are going to get in the way of building wind farms, things that are necessary things. Now we know, we want to be, we're environmentally sound and all this sort of things. So we want to do those things properly. But there are many things, and it's just that looking forward. It's appreciating what frameworks are in place. So it was that policy commitment by governments saying we are going to do this thing, because quite frankly, when we did this work, I was most saddened by Mexico, because it was one of the countries where the actual price for onshore wind was so low, it was record breaking. And because of this desire to move to a more centrally controlled system of government. But the trouble is that means a lot of wind isn't being developed, which is the cheapest stuff. So if CFE could do more development of wind, that would be super. But it is getting this. It is looking forward. It's that continuity of policy that Mona described. That's the key thing, because a lot of things happen because wind is pretty cheap. Things happen. People will invest in it. We talked as part of preparing the report to various banks, and they were saying, no, we don't have any problem with getting money to lend to good quality projects. We have money. We have money to do that. What we have is just the supply of projects was the main concern. So I think it's that looking forward, and there are that has that aspect of policy, but it also, as Mona described, it has the aspect of grid connection, realizing that grid is an enabler, and realizing that these things need to happen rather than doing one step and then realizing there's another problem to solve. People have solved these problems. It's looking longer distance. What is going to get in the way, and how can we actually do something to really enable things to happen? So it is sorting out policy. It's sorting out the transmission grid, having a plan, and making sure that it's straightforward to permit. There are various things you need to test for wind farms, but it's very important that you test those. But it's all the other stuff that gets stuck with that whole process of different organisations, as Mona described very succinctly. And those are the key things I think need to happen.
Okay, Mike, I think it's a matter of understanding that energy transition needs to look into the energy system as something that you need to modernize as well. So if you don't think in the necessity of modernizing the energy system, it's impossible to drive the energy transition in the electricity sector. I think this is one of the key takeaways of Mona's report there, and you have highlighted it perfectly. So,
I mean, one other thing that I would like to bring out was we were talking about the change that happens over a 5-year period, but actually I would draw people's attention to what happens in 2026, where the impact of various measures appears. So, for example, in Brazil, we were forecasting that we double the amount of onshore wind built in 2026. But this is a continuing thing. You started something, and we limited it to 5 years to assess the impact. But you started something that was bigger than maybe we've suggested in the impact, because it's an ongoing process that you started and benefit from, in 2027, 2028, what have you. And that's the exciting thing about this. Maybe you haven't pulled it out enough in the report, but it starts something that is even bigger than we've suggested.
Yeah, I think this is a trend in wind energy, and I think this is going to be a trend as well in offshore wind energy, that our expectations are lower than the reality is showing. Okay, let's go ahead with some questions for our speakers here. I would say I will endorse a general questions to all of them. So, and the question is, how do they see, where do they see the biggest barriers facing wind power developments in their respective countries? I would like to start with Elvia, because I see that there are as well some barriers in Brazil, despite Brazil is the bright spot in wind energy this year. Elvia, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ramon. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I'm glad to be in this very good discussion. So when you talk about Brazil, despite of and because of wind sector has been increased a lot in the last 10 years, maybe in the last 5 years, we have some barriers. I could say that we have three kind of barriers. The first one is a sectoral barrier, exactly because the industry has been increasing so fast in the last 3 years, we need to look to increase the production in industrial process and bring more supplies in face the very strong demand. The relation is since 2009 until 2017, we increased per year about 2 gigawatts. But now, after 2018-19, we has been increasing about 4 gigawatts. It's a double of the regular increase that was a strong increase. And for this reason, we need to look for strong the supply chain. It is a sector barrier. There are other barriers that is macroeconomic barriers. Brazil needs to increase the economy. Since 2014, we don't have the increase in GDP. Economy is so slow, and it can reduce the demand in the future for our sector, for electricity demand. And the third one is a lack of political commitment to mobilize a private investment and promote an investment-friendly economic and regulatory environment. We noticed that if you want to a green recovery, if you want to invest in green energy to increase the economy, we need a political committee, and you can notice this strong political committee from the government. I think it's three big barriers for us now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elvia. I would say that this kind of problems would be very well received in the Mexican situation today. So I would like to hear Mauricio about the Mexican barriers. What do you think, Mauricio, is needed in Mexico to, let's say, to see realize a green recovery in your country?
Thank you very much, Ramon. Thank you very much, Jiwe, for the opportunity to share with you, with the Jiwe community, our views and our comments about the situation in Mexico in the renewable sector. Answering your question, we think that we can identify as well at least 3 major barriers to achieving the green recovery in Mexico. The first of all, and maybe the most important, is the new path that the energy policy has taken, in which, in addition to minimizing the national and international goals in terms of the environment, it has prioritized the generation of energy from fossil fuels. Of course, this has a lot of consequences. The second one is the regulatory gridlock. And the third one is the regulatory uncertainty and the lack of clear rules. These 3 factors become evident as we experience the paralysis of the regulator and the continuous proposals of radical changes to the 2014 electricity model. Of course, there is a regulatory gridlock, as you may know, and the report has some paragraphs about this. Since 2019, administrative procedures with the regulator have experienced significant delays. These delays in authorizations and the refusal to modify permits affected many wind and solar would come into operation in the next 3 years. We have an estimate that around 3.8 gigawatts of installed capacity, equivalent to investments of around $40 to $100 million, is waiting in line because of this regulatory gridlock. There is also regulatory uncertainty. By the end of 2018, the new government removed one of the most important elements of the wholesale electricity market. As you may know, the long-term energy auctions, the so-called renewable auctions, were permanently suspended, even though their results were impressive. So since 2019, there have been at least 4 strong attempts to change the rules of operation of the market, up to the proposal in September 2021 of a constitutional reform, the so-called energy reform. Of course, before 2019, the renewable sectors experienced a very different environment. We hope in this case that for the sake of the environment and the economy, that this uncertainty it will end soon and the vision towards the future and the climate emergency changes. Thank you, Ramon.
Thank you, Mauricio. In my mind, in Mexico, it's sad to say, but I think this is a reality. It's much more than uncertainty. I think this is certainty that we have an ideological problem. So when the energy matrix and when it comes to the energy nationalism, we have a problem. So I mean, and it is clear that there is not an interest in driving the paths of energy transition because this is something impossible. So if it's impossible under the understandings of an ideologically design of the electricity system in Mexico, taking into the consideration the structure of the electricity sector in the country. So I think this is really a strong barrier to overcome, and we need to try, or I think we need to put on the table the benefits that Mexico is lacking without entering into the path of the energy transition according to their own national determined contributions and things, and highlighting the damage that is already done. Because if I'm not wrong, half 50% of the supply chain has gone in terms of labor. So this is something that we need to highlight in order to provide the right signals, the right messages to the correspondent authorities that are in charge of the energy sector. Wind power is not just a matter of energy. Wind power is a matter of economic growth, and this is something rooted in the energy transition. And when governments doesn't realize this reality, then we have let's say additional barriers to overcome. So, having said that, let's dive into South Africa with Lekonolo. We heard that in South Africa, in Glasgow, South Africa announced really a historic partnership with other governments to support a just transition, with clearly a focus on phasing out coal and supporting skilled green job creation. I would ask Lekonolo, how do she see, what are let's say the most strong recommendations that you could provide to the South African government to unlock the benefits of wind power there?
Good evening again. I'd certainly say to unlock wind energy development and to go about it at a faster pace, accelerating the bringing on of wind energy onto the South African grid. I think in the past 10 years, we've done pretty well in that currently we have over 3 gigawatts of wind energy on our grid. But there's still a lot of work to be done with the 6 years that we lost out when we had no procurement of new renewable energy. So in 2021, we have they've appointed through the bidding round an additional 1.6 gigawatts, which is now in the process of reaching financial close. So definitely getting that fast-tracked and ensuring a committed timeline to future procurement rounds of wind energy will definitely be key for the green recovery in South Africa. Another point is definitely also the transmission system development. I hear all my colleagues from the other developing countries are mentioning this too. What you find in South Africa is that the transmission system was mainly concentrated in areas that were focused on the mining industry. And now it completely differs from the wind resource pattern that we have in South Africa, which is now focused in another part of the country. And now that is also driving a need to create additional transmission capacity in the coastal regions. What we had as well is there's now no grid capacity in one of the provinces that has the highest wind resource. And another point would be skills development, which can also be driven through the localization strategy that is embedded in the renewable energy procurement, where there are commitments that the IPPs have to serve the different communities in which they operate. And through focusing on just energy transition initiatives and developing skills in those regions, by training of wind technicians, I think there's great opportunity there for a collaboration with our government to ensure that South Africa can take the wind energy sector forward with skills that are locally based. Thank you.
Thank you, Leso. I have a question for you. Do you think in the next, I would say in the next short term, we can see some renewable energy auctions there in South Africa? And specifically
Yes,
for wind power?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if our integrated resource plan has targets of a yearly limit of 1.6 gigawatts up until the year 2030. So there has been a short-term schedule that is available. However, we just, I think, all just anticipating the officializing of this process, but we do expect to have a bidding round of about 1.6 gigawatts of wind within this first quarter of 2022.
Okay. Okay. So I would endorse to Mike, I would say a last question. I think we have a couple of minutes for that. Mike, where do you think, what would be the area most interesting in terms of seeing this unlock potential of the investments of wind power in the countries? What is the area of interest that you see most that can be most highlighted? Job creation, or do you think it's going to be the economic benefits for the GDP of the country overall, or do you think it's a matter of just transition? What do you think? What is the hottest spot for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it does depend on who you're talking with to some degree. The point is, there's a whole list of great benefits. That's the point. You get more jobs, you get more GDP, you get you get a major reduction in the use of water, which is something you don't necessarily think about when you think about wind turbines, but you do. You also get power and electricity, and if we're going to decarbonize transport and what have you, that's very important. But you also get this major impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions. So there's lots of things in that going on. So I wouldn't like to pick on one particularly. I just think there's a very long list of benefits. So, before people would talk about in the wind energy industry that you can't make a mistake if you say buy a Siemens turbine. This is a long time ago. You just can't be. No one's going to criticize you for doing that. But I would say to politicians, no one's going to criticize you for enabling wind energy to happen, because it's a technology that's cheap and has all those benefits. Who's really going to have a problem with that? The point is, we are in this climate emergency. We need to do things quickly, and no one will point the finger at politicians who enable things to happen on enabling more wind. As I say, we are in the UK have got, I said, 37% of our electricity at the moment from wind. We expect to go much higher. We are going to hit potentially problems with that, but we're having to sort it out. But no one's going to criticize anybody for backing wind and embracing it in a much more concerted and determined way to attack climate change.
No, okay, yeah, absolutely sure, Mike. I think we support this overarching idea that investing in wind power is not only energy, it's much more than that.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
And understanding the drivers of investing in wind energy by our politicians is a job that we need to bring to them, and it's always a hard task. We have here a question to Mauricio Herrera. I think this is the last minute question, Mauricio. And it says, so are there many wind industry suppliers with the production sites in Mexico who also support the expansion of the wind industry in the United States? Where are the typical wind industry production clusters located in Mexico?
I'm sorry, Ramon, I couldn't hear well the question.
It's a double question. Are there many wind industry suppliers with the production sites in Mexico who also support the expansion of the wind industry in the United States of America? And the second is, where are the typical wind industry production clusters located in Mexico?
Well, yes, there are many producers, many project developers and manufacturers from all over the world in Mexico. You have to remember that Mexico has been a very attractive country for investments in the wind industry. So, and also because of the privileged location, geographical location of Mexico, we have very defined locations for the wind industry. That means Oaxaca, maybe Tamaulipas, and some other places in the country. I cannot say that we have some specific, or certain country has some specific investments or large investments over the rest, but we have investment from all over the world, from the European Union, from the United States, from Spain, etc.
And what I see is that some of these industries are as well focusing in the United States, taking into consideration the lack of opportunities in the Mexican market. Now, I'm thinking in tower building and some other industries that are located in the coast of the Gulf of Mexico that are focusing into the States, isn't it so, Mauricio?
Well, you know, we have already talked about the regulatory instability and the political environment that we are experiencing right now. All of this is taken into account by the investors, and if they don't feel confidence in the sector, they will move away from Mexico, maybe to the United States as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's end this really interesting discussion with the good news that Brazil is bringing us to the meeting, and try to see the future with optimism. Try to push hard in the path of the energy transition, and take into account in our discuss that wind power is much more than energy. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to all the attendees this afternoon, and we expect to see you very soon again with some other highlights that we can put on the table to share with you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elvia, Letogo, Mauricio, and Mike. See you soon.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. That is the end of the seminar. And thanks so much for coming along. If you want to download the report, you can hit the QR code. You click the scan the QR code there, and that'll take you through to the report, or obviously you'll find it on our website, gwec.net. But for now, that is everything for this session, and you'll be able to find it on YouTube if you want to watch it back or pick up anything you might have missed. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.